Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we're going to be testing 13 different radar detectors and seeing how they respond to instant-on radar. Now with instant-on radar, in this situation, the officer normally has his radar gun turned off, and only when he sees a car ahead that he wants to clock, he turns on his radar gun, and then your detector is going to begin alerting. And in this situation, we just want to see how fast is the detector going to let you know that the officer is using radar up ahead. Obviously, the faster the better. Our goal here is going to be within half a second or less. Some detectors are going to take longer to alert you to instant on up ahead, versus other detectors are going to be much faster at letting you know that something's going on. Now, because measuring reaction speed is really what we're testing here, for every single test run that I did, I do a series of claps before the test run. This way I could perfectly sync both cameras, one on the radar detector, another one on the radar gun. Then Yellow Eye, who's helping me test here again, he's driving away in his Miata. I would go ahead and tag him once from behind with the radar gun. We'd measure the speed here with rear detections, and then he would turn around up ahead and start driving back towards me, and then I would shoot him a second time and we would get a front detection. Now, besides measuring the reaction times for the detectors, which is really the main thing that I wanted to test, I also noticed some differences with the arrows. We tested both front and rear, and some of the detectors behave differently when it comes to the arrows. I also noticed some things like with the ramp up. You would expect the detector at close range to alert full tilt, and typically detectors did, but not always. Additionally, most of the time detectors would alert to just one signal present, but some detectors would alert to maybe 2 or 3 signals incorrectly. I was only running one radar gun with one radar antenna. I tried originally having the radar antenna near the radar gun itself, but I found it kind of struggled to get a good lock, and so I actually moved the radar antenna just off camera a little bit to the left on top of the steering wheel area, mounting the radar antenna a little bit higher. It gave it a better field of view up ahead, and the radar gun did a better job of acquiring speeds. The test course itself had little to no traffic. Sometimes there was traffic, and just to help the radar gun do a better job of locking in the speed that I want of the car with the radar detector, I had the Stalker DSR2X set up in directional mode, so it would only clock vehicles maybe coming towards me or only the vehicle moving away from me. And then the DSR2X, of course, it is a Ka-band gun, operates on 34/7. Now, every detector was set up pretty much the same way. We had X-band turned off, K-band turned on, Ka filters turned off for better performance, and then for segmentation, I had them segmented segments 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8. So scanning all of the 3 main frequency ranges on Ka, plus some additional segments to catch your out-of-tune or off-frequency stalker guns. I've done a video recently talking about that. And then multi-radar detection was turned off on all of the detectors. And finally, this is a Ka-band testing video. I've got another video coming where we tested on K-band. There's a lot more runs that we had to do on K-band because we played with different settings and filtering options available on the detectors, which I noticed did affect the performance. But for this one, this is just the Ka-band test. For the K-band test, make sure you're subscribed so you can get notified for when that video gets released. Alright, so starting off, let's begin with the Uniden R7. So testing from the front, the radar detector is super quick. Just 0.3 seconds, and again, our target here is something under 0.5. So the R7 here is doing great. Additionally, the arrows are also correctly pointing up ahead, which was good, though I noticed as I started getting closer to the radar gun, the arrows flipped to the side before I actually started getting really close. Additionally, I also noticed the detector would sometimes display multiple signals over on the left-hand side in the all-threat display, even though there was only one signal being transmitted. Then next, testing with rear detection, again, super quick. Just 0.3 seconds to get that alert. The arrows, though, were again kind of weird here. They pointed the wrong way. The radar was actually coming from behind, but the arrows were incorrectly pointing up ahead. So great response time here from the R7, but the arrows, not the greatest. Next, moving on, let's do the Uniden R3. Now, testing from the front, again, this detector is crazy fast. Though I did notice sometimes it would show multiple bogeys present, just like the R7 did, but really the performance here is excellent with the R3. Then moving on and looking at the rear detection, again, super fast. No complaints here at all. Next, moving on to the Uniden DFR8, let's take a look at their budget platform, the DFR series. Testing from the front, the detector did alright, a little over half a second, and again, under half a second is the goal here. So not stellar, but still alright. Now, the weird thing I noticed is sometimes the frequency would actually be switching between 34/7 and 33/7. The Stalker transmits at 34/7, so it was weird to see it actually displaying sometimes incorrect frequencies. Next, moving on to rear detection, it actually did a little bit better this time. Only 0.4 seconds. Additionally, the frequency display was fine here. It was displaying the correct frequency the whole time. And that's kind of something interesting here. I've been noticing with the Uniden detectors, if it displays multiple signals or incorrect frequencies, it happens from the front and not from the rear. I don't know if it's just close range, maybe being overdriven or something, but just kind of something interesting I noticed. The frequency part and the multiple bogeys part seemed to be better when it was picking up signals from behind. Next, let's take a look at the Batman detector. This is the worst radar detector I've ever tested. You can find it online for 20 to 30 bucks or so. It's honestly kind of a piece of junk. I've got a whole video on it that you can check out if you like, but for this specific video, really what we're testing for is going to be the response time of the detector. Now, testing from the front, it takes a little bit over a second to respond and let you know that you're getting shot with radar. So definitely things are going to be slowing down here. Additionally, I also had it accidentally set to Russian, and so the audio alerts are kind of weird here. After we finished all the KA testing, I actually switched it back to English for the K-band testing, but for KA it was set to Russian. Anyway, moving on to the rear detection. The rear detection was actually a little bit faster, taking about 2/3 of a second to get the alert. So this is faster, but still not at a level that I would be fully comfortable with. Either way, though, it's still helpful to at least get a sense of kind of what we could expect from some of the super cheap detectors. Next, let's move on and take a look at the Radenso Pro M. This has actually done a great job on some of my bench testing. Now, taking it out here for some instant-on testing, from the front, it took just 0.4 seconds to alert, so nice and quick, no issues, no drama at all. Great job here by the Pro M. Then moving on to rear detection, it was a little slower this time, taking about 2/3 of a second to alert, so a little bit longer than I would like, but still, overall, it did a pretty decent job. Next, let's take a look at the Radenso XP. This is a detector I've liked as kind of a quiet city urban detector, and let's see how it fares. Starting off from the front, unfortunately things were actually pretty slow here. It took over a second to go off. Additionally, the ramp up was kind of weird here. It should be alerting full tilt immediately, but instead it was alerting as a weak signal initially, and then it started to ramp up as if I was getting closer and closer to the source, but it should be alerting full tilt, letting me know that the officer's already getting my speed locked in right now. You'll also notice that it displays different frequencies as I'm driving towards the gun. It initially alerted as 33.7, then switched to 34.7, but it also alerted as 34.2, 33.7 again, and 35.6. I know some other detectors also displayed different frequencies like this, but the XP seemed to do it a little bit more than some of the other detectors. Then testing from the rear, things again were a little bit faster. Took about 0.7 seconds to go off this time, so faster than the front, but still slower than I would like. The ramp up again was kind of weird here. The detector started alerting to a weak signal, and then it started getting stronger and stronger, even though I was actually driving away from the radar gun and he had my speed locked in the whole time. So overall, I'm not really thrilled with the performance numbers of the XP, and I'm also not really happy with the signal presentation, the ramp up that I'm getting out of the detector. The XP, I mean, I think it's a decent detector, but I feel like it largely gets overshadowed by the Uniden R3, which is priced similarly, but the performance is much better. So, I mean, I guess this is another example of why we see that. Next, moving on, let's take a look at the Valentine 1 Gen 2. Now, this is a detector that we know is crazy fast in its reaction times. Now, starting off and testing from the front, the detector took half a second to alert, which is a little bit longer than I was expecting. Plus, it also showed 3 bogeys on screen instead of just 1. Another weird thing is the detector immediately muted itself when it got shot with radar. Now, this is an issue that I know is actually due to the power cable. I was using an Escort smart cord when testing with the V1. This can cause some issues, which I'll talk about more here in just a moment. Next, switching to rear detection, in this case, the V1 was crazy fast. That is more of what I was expecting here with the V1. That said, I also saw some more weird things here. I saw it alert to multiple signals simultaneously, not just one, and the ramp up was weird here. It would alert weak initially, and then it would ramp up and get stronger. Now, I want to talk about the fact that I was using an Escort power cable. This was honestly a mistake on my part. If you take a look over on Valentine's website, they explicitly warn against doing this. They say that if you use an Escort smart cord with your V1, it can actually severely compromise the performance of your detector. Specifically, they've noticed reduced sensitivity on all radar alerts, as well as drastically stretched out decay of current radar alerts. Now, those weren't the issues that I was experiencing. This wasn't a test for long-range detection or how long the signal latches for. This is reaction time, but nonetheless, this could potentially cause issues. I was seeing issues with things like maybe slower alerts, that first half-second detection, as well as seeing multiple bogeys when it shouldn't be, though I know some other detectors did that too. And also the muting thing. I know the Escort power cables are wired differently, and that can incorrectly trigger mute commands on a Valentine 1. So I know that one was an issue with the Escort smart cord. I'd actually meant to bring a V1 cable and a Uniden and all the other ones too. I honestly forgot. I left them at home before the test, so that was my mistake. So I definitely want to mention that could potentially be an issue here with the V1. I've never seen issues maybe with some of the other brands of detectors, but I definitely want to mention this either way. Now, I've been sitting here editing this video and honestly kind of second-guessing myself. I've been wondering if any of my results here are invalid due to power cable issues and mistakes on my end. The last thing I want to do is start posting bad information or any sort of misleading information due to maybe something incorrect that I did on my end. So I've been sitting here kind of double-checking my work and doing some bench testing, and what I found was kind of unexpected and surprising. Here, check this out. Now, bench testing with the V1, response time is great, but I noticed it was still displaying multiple bogeys incorrectly. I noticed the detector was also alerting at 100% signal strength, so I figured maybe it was being overdriven. And so I kind of fiddled with the radar gun's position to reduce the signal strength getting to the detector, and that actually seemed to do the trick. Now the detector still had great response times, but it was only alerting to one signal at a time. Plus, the signal strength was now down to maybe only 4 or 5 bars out of 6. Now, overdriving issues, they're not anything new. I even have a whole video dedicated to that, and I could see it happening here too. Now, in terms of performance with the V1, the results here were excellent. It was consistently responding around 0.3 seconds or so in every single test shot. And I love seeing consistency like that. That, to me, is a mark of a really good quality detector. And then now that I had the signal strength stuff figured out, I switched over to an Escort power cable, and initially I was actually still seeing the same results. The alert times, again, were around 0.3 seconds like before. Plus, the Escort cable was telling the V1 to mute itself, just like I saw in the road tests. However, as I continued testing, I noticed the results were now kind of inconsistent. Sometimes it took longer to alert, around 0.6 seconds. Other times, it was way faster. In fact, faster than I was getting with even a V1 cable, believe it or not. So with the V1, the power cable did seem to make a difference in terms of response times, and the signal strength seemed to have an effect as well. Then after that, I wanted to go and double check maybe some of the other results that I wasn't too sure about either. Starting with the Uniden R3, bench testing it with the Uniden cable, the results here were great. Very consistent, around 1/4 second. Plus, it was only alerting to one signal. It wouldn't show multiple signals present. Then, switching over to an Escort power cable, I was actually seeing the exact same results. Very fast response times and only one signal being alerted to. So in the case of the Uniden detectors, it looks like running an Escort power cable doesn't make a difference. Next, I wanted to go back and double check the results with the Radenso XP and a Radenso power cable. With the reduced signal strength now, I was no longer seeing the issues with the incorrect frequencies being displayed, which was nice, but I was still seeing issues with longer alert times. So 1.3 seconds, that's definitely really long. Plus the ramp up was kind of weird there. It would start weak and then it would start to build over time. It wasn't alerting full strength. I did a couple more test shots and I saw the same results with the ramp up, but the response times kind of varied. They were kind of inconsistent, though they were faster than the 1.3 seconds from that first shot. So variable results, but still kind of slower than the other detectors. Then switching over to the Escort power cable, I was curious to see if that would make any difference. I actually didn't notice any difference at all. Same issues with the ramp up, no incorrect frequencies, and the response times were right at the same ballpark as what I saw with the Radenso power cable, all around 0.9 seconds or so. And so for both the Radenso XP and the Uniden, I noticed the power cable didn't make any difference in the results. It seemed to be more the signal strength. If it was getting a super strong signal initially, that could cause it to display maybe incorrect frequencies or multiple signals simultaneously. But that affected the V1 as well. Now, seeing this happen in bench testing isn't too surprising, but seeing it happen in real life, picking up a radar gun that's hundreds of feet away, that was actually more surprising. I wasn't expecting to see that. So I guess some of the issues that I was seeing in testing was actually due to signal strength issues. The V1, though, was affected also by the power cable, which, again, wasn't an issue for the other brands of detectors, and that did seem to kind of vary the results overall and make them kind of inconsistent. With the V1 cable, the results were much more consistent, alerting around 0.3 seconds. Next, let's move on and take a look at the Rocky Mountain Radar Judge 2.0. Now, this is a detector that advertises scrambling capabilities, which is supposed to prevent a police radar gun from being able to acquire your speed. And so, of course, I tested with the scrambling feature turned on. Now, starting off with front detection with the Judge 2.0. It was a little bit slower than I'd like here to alert. It alerted, but it took about 0.8 seconds to go off. Additionally, you'll notice the radar gun got the speed instantly and just held it the whole time, no issue. The scrambling capabilities did absolutely nothing here with the Judge 2.0. And this is honestly no surprise. It's the exact same behavior I've seen with every single Rocky Mountain radar detector that I've ever tested. Additionally, if you listen to the radar gun's audio Doppler, you won't hear anything weird going on either. Moving on and testing from the rear, again, nothing special here. It took about 2/3 of a second to go off, and again, there's no scrambling from behind either on the radar gun. The radar gun locks the speed quickly and without issue here against the Judge. Next, let's take a look at the Whistler CR97. Now, this detector was surprisingly fast. It alerted in just under 1/4 of a second, and it gave me a nice strong full tilt alert right out of the gate. The alert frequency was correct at 34.7, and overall, it did outstanding here. Great job by the Whistler. Then turning around and testing from behind, it was a hair slower here. But still, this is really good. I noticed the ramp up here, it started off strong initially, and then it started to kind of get weaker as I was driving away from the radar gun. But I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense, because, well, it's a rear shot and I'm driving away from the gun. Overall though, I mean, excellent job here by the CR97. Next, let's switch and take a look at the Escort Max 3. So starting off with the front detection. This was actually incredibly slow here, 1.6 seconds. That's really slow. That's a pretty long time in practice for the officer to be locking in my speed while my detector is completely silent. Next, taking a look at rear detection. It was a little bit faster here, but definitely still lower than I would like, especially considering, honestly, this is kind of an expensive, almost higher end detector too. I would expect more here from the Max 3, but it was pretty slow here in this specific test. Next, let's take a look at the Escort Redline 360C. So starting off with front detection, it took about 0.8 seconds to go off. So slower than I would like, which I'll talk about more here in just a second. The arrows, they did a good job. They pointed straight ahead as I would like. In terms of reaction time, we've noticed with the Redline 360C in testing that segmentation can make a big difference. Each individual segment that you turn on can measurably start to slow down the detector. So for the fastest response times, you're going to want to run maybe only 3 segments, like 2, 5, and 8. I was testing with 5 segments enabled total, which does slow it down a little bit. And honestly, I would expect better performance even with more segments enabled, considering the fact that this is an expensive radar detector. Plus, if you take a look over on Escort's website, they're advertising that their Blackfin DSP chip that they're using gives them 25 times more processing power than the Redline EX. Now that's weird considering the fact that you really need to start cutting out segments to get the fastest speeds possible and get it something down closer to what you get with other detectors that can scan more of Ka band all at once. Anyway, moving on and taking a look at rear detection, I actually encountered another issue here, which I guess was another mistake on my part. The radar detector car was parked near my car when we were getting started, and I've got a Wi-Fi hotspot in my car, and the Redline 360C was connecting to the Wi-Fi hotspot. Now, I beta test firmware, and sometimes there's issues to where even if I'm running the latest firmware, I was testing with 1.8, there's still some issues sometimes where it wants me to update the firmware. I gotta say no. And so for that reason, it was doing the Wi-Fi update prompt when we started doing the test. We didn't realize that. And because of that, it actually gave us a really slow alert. Over 2.5 seconds to get that alert. That's really, really slow. That's not the same as what we're seeing when the Wi-Fi prompt isn't there. The arrows, fortunately, were correct. It was pointing behind for the rear shot, but still the delay was excessive. I didn't actually know that happens when the Wi-Fi prompt is up, and I guess it was waiting for it to time out. I'm not totally sure, but it was definitely affecting performance. I know that if the detector is updating itself over Wi-Fi, of course you're not going to be getting your radar detection there, but I didn't know that also happens if it's prompting you to update too. So kind of an unexpected thing and a mistake, but still something interesting that we learned nonetheless. Next, let's take a look at the Escort Max 360C. It's a little bit slower than what I would hope for, taking just over 0.6 seconds, but the arrows themselves, they did a good job here pointing straight ahead. Then flipping around and testing from the rear, again a little bit slower than I would like, 0.67 seconds from the rear, so almost the same as what we saw from the front. Plus the arrows, again, they did a good job here pointing towards the rear, as they should. So the Max 360C was faster than the Redline 360C, but still not on par with your R7 or your V1 Gen 2. And this is interesting because the Max platform actually used to be really fast from Escort, but I think over the years, as they've tried to kind of cut down some of the false alerts, one of the trade-offs is it's kind of slowed down the reactivity of the detector. And so it's slower now than what we saw from the Maxes maybe when we were testing years ago. So just kind of, I guess, an interesting point to note here with the Max platform. Finally, let's take a look at the Cobra Road Scout. This is a radar detector and dashcam combo unit from Cobra. This is also the worst performing radar detector by far that I tested here in this group. Let me just show you the results so you can see for yourself. Seriously? I mean, what do you say to that? This is a $450 radar detector. I know Cobras don't have the greatest reputation, but this is supposed to be part of their elite series of radar detectors, but there's nothing elite about that performance, you know? If we next turn around and take a look at the rear detection, at 2.3 seconds, that's faster, but that's still worse than any other radar detector that I'd tested. So I'm definitely not impressed by the Road Scout here in this kind of reaction time testing. I actually just recently posted a full review of the Road Scout over on my website. It's got a number of issues besides just the response time to instant on. I mean, cool idea, but it's got a number of issues like this in practice. You can take a look at that. I'll link to it down in the video description. But overall, when it comes to instant on, this is like the last radar detector that you would want to get. In fact, things get even more interesting when we take a closer look at K-band, which I'll cover here in the next video. And so I guess now some of the takeaways that we learned here from the testing. First off, when it comes to instant on radar, if there's no radar transmitting, obviously you're not going to be getting any advanced warning. You're going to need to pick up something in order for your radar detector to be able to alert, right? And so when it comes to protecting yourself from instant on, you're actually going to want a detector that's going to be picking up instant on shots when officers are actually clocking cars farther up the street ahead of you, and then they turn off their radar gun, but you've already picked them up because they've been clocking other cars ahead of you. And for that reason, you're going to want a detector with good sensitivity, number one, to pick up those shots at a distance, and two, you're also going to want a very responsive detector. And so if we take a look at the detectors that did the very best, I would say we've got the Uniden R7, the Uniden R3, and the Valentine 1 Gen 2. Those detectors, I would say, would be the very best against instant-on radar. There's also the Whistler CR97, which did a fantastic job here in terms of responsiveness, but the sensitivity isn't quite as sensitive as some of the other detectors. You won't get quite as much range, but in terms of reactivity, it did a fantastic job here. Then as far as our honorable mentions that were a little bit slower, but could still be all right, we've got the Uniden DFR8, the Radenso Pro M, and the Escort Max 360C. Now, to do an even better job with this test, I would have loved to have done multiple runs with each detector, just to make sure everything is consistent and reliable and all that kind of stuff, and to really verify the results. But we really only had time for one pass front and rear with each detector, just due to time constraints, so something to mention there. Then as far as the radar gun that I used, the Stalker DSR2X, this did a great job. This was consistently and reliably able to lock in speeds around maybe 0.4 seconds or so. Plus, because it also has fastest mode capabilities, if there was another car maybe driving farther away but going faster than the closer test car, it was able to lock in their speed and display that as well. Now, in terms of some quirks that I noticed with the DSR2X, I noticed sometimes at super close range, it would kind of display a fake fastest speed that was roughly twice the strongest target speed. I didn't really notice that kind of fake fastest speed at a distance. It seemed to happen just at closer range. Overall, though, the DSR2X, it did a great job. I saw more quirks and issues with the K-band gun, but not so much with the DSR2X. It did great. I was really happy with it. And as far as the testing, yeah, I mean, that's it for now. I think it went pretty well. There were some mistakes that I made, but I think overall we can definitely still learn a lot from this test nonetheless. And next, we'll go ahead and take a look at the K-band, kind of testing with different settings and filtering options and seeing how that affects the results, because that definitely makes a difference too. So stay tuned for that next. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you in the next video.